Hello, Spark fans, and welcome back to Advancing Spark, where today I am digesting everything that happened last week in San Francisco. So I just got back via some other countries. I've no idea what time or country or day I'm currently occupying, but we have so much to talk about from last week. So Wednesday and Thursday both had their respective keynotes, and that's when Databricks make all of their big announcements about all the things they've been working on, all the things they've been secretly scribbling away with, all the things they're making GA, and they're saying it's no longer preview, use it at your leisure. And there's a ton. There's so much for us to go through. So like they did last week, I'm going to focus on the two separate days. So we'll do all the Databricks announcements first. That was last Wednesday's keynote. And then in another video, I'll do all Thursdays, and that's more the open source, what they're putting out into the world, all of that stuff. And just doing them as two separate videos is still a huge amount of things to talk about. Now, with a conference labeled as Generation AI, it's no shock that it's all about generative AI and various different ways of just sneaking it into various different places. It is all over the place. And there's lots of things we can talk about, how they're using it, where it's integrated, what it's for in that respect. So tons and tons of things to talk about. As always, if it's your first time around here, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let us know what you thought of the Data AI Summit down in the comments. And if you didn't actually go, well, just register online and watch all the stuff. It's free. Just go watch it. Go. And then come back. And then we'll talk about things, because that's what we do here. Right. Okay, let's begin our journey of announcements with the biggie. The big ticket announcement, the big thing that was a real focus is this Lakehouse IQ. Now, this is a new product being put into the Databricks workspace. Now, all of the demos, all of the shiny, all of the, hey, look what it can do, is all basically using an assistant. It's basically always using something that is writing code for you. It's interpreting natural language, normal chat GPT kind of thing, where I would like to run this query, and it writes a query for you, and you can run that query against your Spark cluster, against your SQL warehouse, whatever it happens to be. But that's not what Lakehouse IQ is. It's not an assistant. So, there will be a Databricks assistant. Databricks Assistant is coming. It's going to be plumbed into the workspace. You can pop it open, ask it questions, get it to write code for you. That is coming. They've demoed it. It looks pretty cool. That's not what Lakehouse IQ is. So Lakehouse IQ is a large language model of its own trained on your data. So in each and every different Databricks, I guess, tenant? I assume tenant? Each Databricks account is going to have, up at the Unity catalog level, has to have Unity catalog, its own model that is trained specifically on your data. So we dip over to Mate doing a great deep dive demo of everything going on. You can see all the stuff it's sucking in. Essentially, they're going to train a large language model for each and every client. And that model is going to suck in all your Unity catalog, your data dictionary, what data you have, where it lives, how people use it, all of the documentation you might happen to have stored in there, who's using it, how often they use it, what kind of queries they write, where people actually are in terms of permissions and things, the most popular elements, the least popular elements, everything. Basically, all of your Databricks usage are going to be sucked up and trained, still kept within your account, but used to train this large language model. So then when you use the assistant and you say, write me a query to say, tell me profit based on sales category, and if there isn't a field called sales category, it'll work out what you mean because it knows what the acronyms mean, because it's seen so many people write queries and comment their code and label columns and things. By looking at what everybody does, it can then interpret natural language far better than just something that was a generic natural language interpreter. It's trained on your domain information. It knows your data model. It knows who uses your data model. It knows what queries people write in the data model. Therefore, when you ask it for something, it can interpret it a lot better. That's what Lakehouse IQ is. So sure, there's an assistant that's going to sit on top that's going to use Lakehouse IQ to actually make it better. But you can use the assistant without turning on this model. So there's going to be this model trained for everybody. And that's pretty darn cool. So Lakehouse IQ is a large language model just for you inside your Unity catalog based on all of your stuff. Now that's a pretty big way to start things off, right? So that is coming. No idea timescales. We'll start seeing things like the assistant cropping up soon. But you remember, you have to have Unity catalog in. So if you've been on the fence going, I'm not sure if I want Unity catalog, this thing that's free, baked into Databricks, and adds governance and automatic column level lineage and data documentation. I'm not sure I'm convinced I really want it. Hopefully this is even more of a convincing argument. So many of the new features we're going to be talking about are Unity Catalog only. You have to be using Unity Catalog to get all of this stuff. So yeah, Lakehouse IQ. Announcement number 1. It's a bit of a biggie. Now, then we had a deep dive into essentially how to build your own large language models and how to build applications that use LLMs. Now, there's a whole bunch of features that they are releasing here to support that, essentially that journey. So vector search, the ability to build essentially kind of your own vector database based within Databricks, is a new bit of functionality, some new libraries, a new way of actually sort of grabbing data from a Delta table, parsing all the document chunks. They said chunks so many times in that session. And then pulling it in and being able to use it to do semantic search. How close are these two things together? Bring back the most relevant record. That kind of stuff is going to be much easier with vector search. It does rely on having some kind of embeddings model, but that's getting easier to do anyway. Feature serving, not to be confused with online feature store. So we had feature stores where it was just a Delta table and you had to have a cluster turned on to go and query it. And then we had online feature stores where you had to have some kind of object store. Some kind of Postgres DB, some kind of object thing that we can go and query in real time. Feature serving is not that. Feature serving is saying we're going to serve it up actually real time, again using some serverless compute over on the Databricks control plane, and you're going to query and you're going to serve that out, immediately allowing you to do essentially that whole idea of you ask your chatbot, you ask your large language model a question, and it can go and go, right, okay, what's similar to this question? Use your vector search to go and find out what's actually relevant or what we actually mean, and then use feature serving to go and grab some information so that it can return the right values. Essentially just trying to make it more sophisticated, trying to make it better without having to have the biggest model in the known universe. Loads of stuff going in there to actually sort of push that place that Databricks is the place to be developing large language models. That's essentially their strategic push from all these announcements. So they're actually building the models. So there's going to be a whole bunch of open sourced AI models actually built into the curated library. So essentially just a gateway to just loads of different AI models just pulled together and served up for you. And they're always talking about this, kind of a gateway of going and be able to connect to many known AI services and just plug in and connect through Databricks. AutoML for LLMs is coming. So AutoML you can use within Databricks currently, and there's a bunch of just traditional machine learning problems, and you can say, actually, just figure out the best model for me, and it'll run a load of different trainings. It'll measure the accuracy, and it'll recommend what you should do. But then you take the notebook, and you can pull it apart, and you can tweak the accuracy and get it even further with your actual pro data scientists. This is the same thing, but for large language models. So whether you're doing like some embeddings or various different types of large language model, you can actually run this. It'll go through, it'll pick the relevant one for you, it'll try a load of different things, it'll run a load of them, and it'll return the various choices of models, and then you can pass way more data into it, and then build the model that you're trying to do. Just try to make it actually accessible, right? Because one of the big arguments, so we saw that Databricks have now kind of announced their intent to acquire Mosaic. Mosaic is a gigantic machine learning model kind of specialist. Again, it's a bit of a OpenAI Mosaic kind of idea. And what they did a lot of really smart stuff in the keynote. Have a look at the keynote, because it tells you how they actually managed to challenge needing so much data and paying so much to train the gigantic, mega hosted pre-trained models, and just saying, actually, it's achievable to build your own model using less data and actually making it cost effective. So lots of things, lots of thrust in that direction. Now, the whole idea of building a large language model is really tricky, because unlike when we have a traditional model and we're trying to say, well, this is segmentation. What segment does this record go into? What segment does this record into? Or forecasting. What's the forecast for this based on this? And you can put out a number and you can check it against an existing thing and say, is that right? We can test the accuracy of machine learning models. When we're talking about large language models, and what we're expecting is a verbose written response. I can give it a prompt and I get a response. It's really hard to test because it's not always going to give you the same response. It's going to actually respond in different ways. That might still be accurate. It's just different ways of explaining it. So if you give it different prompts and it gives you different responses, how do you actually test that? So we saw a demo of MLflow LLM evaluation. So many acronyms. Somebody else talking about actually you can see if I give it this prompt, for this experiment, this is the response. For this experiment, this is the response. For this experiment, this is the response. Oh, actually, that response makes the most sense. But it's a little bit, it's not that objective. You're looking at it going, this response makes sense to me. But it's a way of actually managing and maintaining and keeping a record of a load of different prompt examples and a load of different responses as your models evolve and get trained. And so you at least have some transparency, some ability to go back and check, and did that improve the answer? Did the answer for this thing get better? Oh, actually, that answer got better, but actually it's worse at answering that question. Why is that? That's what MLflow evaluation for LLMs looks like. Really interesting, really, really cool. Lots of good stuff in there. And also allowing us to track other facets of the model. So looking at cost and latency, response times, all that kind of good stuff. Again, so many things all coming out here. We've got the gateway that I mentioned, allowing you to go through and connect to so many different existing AI services, but rather than having to maintain so many different platforms and connectivities, you can just connect all through Databricks. Pretty cool. Load of optimizations for specific model types. So essentially, kind of linking into that curated AI models list, any of those models that they're curating and saying, well, here's a load of existing models that you could use. Here's a load of existing kind of model types that you could use. And then actually really, really, really fine-tuning the Databricks model serving servers to make that as fast as physically possible. So if you're picking one of the curated models, they're going to be optimized. They're going to be faster. So really, really interesting. The final piece here is Lakehouse monitoring. Now, that's not really just an ML thing. Yes, it'll do it for model serving, capturing loads of telemetry, giving you loads of dashboards and things about how your models are performing. Is the latency slowly going down over time? Is the accuracy of traditional models working? Just loads and loads of good stuff in there. But also just general telemetry on your Lakehouse. And what percentage of tables are actually currently being managed in Unity Catalog? How are people using it? What are the response times? What are the costs that you're currently spending across all of your Databricks workspaces? All of that stuff bundled into Lakehouse monitoring, which is very, very cool. So loads and loads of things in there, all of which need their own deep dive video, and we'll be looking at those things as we go through. And then we had Reynolds in, come on, and I love Reynolds, always super techie keynotes. And he wanted to dig into something that's actually enabled via Lakehouse IQ. Now, one of the main ambitions that we've heard the Databricks kind of leadership say year after year is that they don't want people to have to look after partitions, look after Z ordering and file layouts, look after indexes. They don't want you to do that. They assume that should just be managed for you. And we're going to give a really good kind of dive into some of Codd's original theorem about why that is the case, why that is the utopian dream of any kind of data platform is it just works. I don't have to worry about performance tuning. Be a glorious day. So what they've built into some of Lakehouse IQ is some of these things. So indexes actually keeping track of what kind of things people are querying, what questions people are asking, and tuning the data in those tables to be able to respond to those questions better. Because they know, they can see the queries coming in, therefore they can actually do some of that stuff. The same with data layout optimization. Looking at the data and going, actually, this could be a better shape. Now, don't you worry about telling me what to partition it on. I've got more information about how people use the data than you do, engineer. And actually just starting to automatically go and manage how that data is actually pushed onto disk and how it's actually sort of laid out on disk. Same with workload management. Rather than having just a big old dumb queue, or even a queue with kind of ad hoc queries sidetracked to a fast lane, just being a lot smarter about it and knowing the kind of things people are asking, knowing the kind of queries that people are going to ask at certain times, and being able to be a bit more responsive and reactive to it. So not a lot of details in those three, but absolutely great vision set out for just making it better and faster and cheaper. So loads of things actually come into there. When we talk about the next day's worth of announcements, there's a load of really interesting things that fall into it, talking about essentially how do you make Delta tables go faster. So check the next video. We'll talk about that stuff then. Just a quick thing. I've got these videos in the wrong order. So having a look as a quick example of that prompt comparison of one model to a second model, being able to actually see how it answered different questions, going through different things. Again, do say you should go and watch Casey's video digging through how that actually fits. It's super interesting to see actually how they think it works, how this stuff works in reality. That's when you're building your own LLMs. Then we had another fairly large announcement, another huge announcement. So Ali heralded this as the end of the storage wars. Not sure I entirely believe that, but I do hope it's true. Essentially, because Delta, Hudi, and Iceberg are all based on Parquet, largely, like 99.99% of all cases is based in Parquet, and they've all got different ways of handling the metadata. Can't we just like have all three different types of metadata, and then it doesn't matter which one you use? Your Parquet is still the same, and then just you've got your Delta metadata, you've got your Iceberg metadata, you've got your Hudi metadata. You can connect to it by whatever system you happen to be using, and no one cares. That's the thrust of this. So Delta 3.0 was announced, and they've got this unified format, which they're calling Uniform, which is a glorious portmanteau. Love it. Essentially saying, from now on, Delta will keep track. So if there's a new addition to Iceberg and the writer version goes up, Delta will then produce the metadata that links to that. If there's a new version of Hudi that likes of his, and then the reader version goes up, Delta is going to produce the relevant metadata. Now that is a challenge, to actually have enough community involvement against all the different communities to make sure that as soon as those releases are made, we're seeing those changes come back and the uniform formats actually kicking out the relevant metadata. But it's a fantastic move. It's a great move to see, just going, you know what, it doesn't matter, it's all the same thing. Can we stop arguing about it and holding each other back? Can we just say Delta, well not Delta, Parquet is Parquet, and whatever next generation file layout you have over the top doesn't really matter. They're all doing good things. So Delta 3.0, you'll be able to turn on uniform mode, and then that'll spit out the extra 2 metadata formats for Iceberg, for Hudi. Pretty cool. That was, you know, just a small little announcement made. Unity Catalog, a whole raft of features made. So along with Lakehouse IQ being obviously a massive, huge addition under the hood of Unity Catalog, we've seen previews announced for a load of things. So row and column filtering, just so you can do row level security and column level security based on people's access controls. Auto tuning, some of those things based on Lakehouse IQ we saw. Hive Metastore API, so anything that was previously plugging into Databricks, the Hive Metastore, or any other Hive Metastore, and then doing sort of automatic pulling of data, you can now plug that straight into Unity, which is cool. Materialized views are a huge thing. So that's more looking at kind of largely streaming use cases. So whenever I update this data, there's a view based on it that we materialize the data out of on a regular cadence, and having that just plumbed in to just make sure people can really quickly just refresh their data and not have to do on-the-fly compute. Loads of interesting things in there. Tags in tables, so that you can actually just filter based on certain asset tags, so you can do security based on certain attributes. Primary phone keys are already out there. Catalog workspace bindings, that's the so important thing, where because you've only got one metastore across your entire AD tenant for a given AD region, well, that means, well, that's madness, because I'd have dev, test, prod, and I don't want my dev catalog, my dev workspace to be able to see my prod databases. That doesn't make any sense. Catalog workspace bindings allows you to get over that. That's the whole point. That's great. And that is out. You can go and have a play with that. Table insights. You can go into Unity Catalog, click on insights, and just see how people use it, what queries people run. The Hive Metastore sync for bringing things up and kind of bringing that over. It's very cool. Databricks Marketplace we saw recently and has also just gone GA. So Databricks Marketplace, you can go into, say, I'd just like to find some weather data and get loads of providers of open source public data and go click, and it automatically just then appear in your Unity Catalog Data Explorer. It's just click, and then you've got the data ready to go, ready to access, as if it was a table in your lake. You can also go and buy data from it, and you can actually sell data via it. You need to be registered as a Databricks data provider, and then you talk to them, you post it. Someone comes to you and says, I'd like to buy that. You need to invoice them separately outside the platform, but then you can just say, and now they've got access, and they will get it just straight into their Unity Catalog. Again, it's really impressive. The ability to undrop a table. So if you drop the table and you delete all your data, You just go, oh, whoops, and undo it, bring everything back. Pretty cool. It's bizarre, but it's pretty cool. And clean rooms is this thing they announced last year, where essentially it's allowing you to have a completely separate, isolated, governed environment where two third parties can provide data into it. Neither of them have access to the other person's data, and it can produce an output. So you can train a model using PII data that you don't have access to get the output of that model without actually ever having to give each other the data. You want to do prediction, and you need some signals that are coming from another side. You don't have the data. You can build models by combining data from different parties. That's what clean rooms is. That's really, really, really interesting. That's now in preview, so we're going to have a look at it. The other massive one, massive announcement for Unity Catalog is this idea of Lakehouse Federation. Now, when they first announced Unity Catalog, they talked about this idea of saying it's not just going to be lake data. It's not just going to be, well, it's a fancy Hive table, Hive metastore. They said we want it to be able to look at data in loads of different sources. In Postgres, in Microsoft SQL Server, in Snowflake, in Amazon Redshift. Wherever it happens to be, they want you to be able to go, well, just register all those tables with Unity Catalog. And then when you're running your queries, we'll select from that source table, bring it into my lake as a Delta table. Select from that Delta table, bring it into my Silver loan as another Delta table. You can now do that in preview. They've got this idea of Lakehouse Federation, adding other data sources to Unity Catalog, doing things like predicate pushdown, doing things like efficient kind of pulling data off and caching it when it needs to. And then they're looking at allowing you to, if you've got security policies set up at the Unity Catalog level, pushing those into the warehouses. So to make sure people querying it are only got what they've access to. Again, really, really cool things being deployed there. The other part that we have on Lakehouses, I don't have the photo here, is an idea called volumes. So whilst this is adding whole data sources, this is adding just data services, generally existing databases I can go and query. One of the traditional patterns that we have is we have like a landing area, and we have files going into that landing area, and then we suck those files up. Now those files might just be corrupt. They might be lots of different schemas, and we're doing some schema like evolution and fixing as we pull it into the lake. That wouldn't work for any of these four sources. But they also announced a thing called volumes. Volumes. Essentially, a folder. That folder is just full of lots of different files, and you can select from that folder and pull it in. But it's registered with Unity Catalog and has security and has management and has data dictionaries and has tagging and all of that good stuff. So loads and loads and loads of features being announced for Unity Catalog, and just a flood of things coming in. And then, yeah, so we've talked a bit about these pieces. The final area of like sort of the more marketplace, the more kind of data sharing parts. So you had the Databricks Marketplace, you had Databricks Clean Rooms, in the middle we've got this idea of Lakehouse apps. Now, they announced those, I think, 2 weeks ago. It's basically this idea that you could build a little app that gets containerized, it's served via Databricks, and allows you to then share it with people and just basically plumb it on top of their Databricks workspace without having to spin up any other infra anywhere in their cloud application. So just a way of sharing applications based within the Databricks Lakehouse ecosystem, based on their Lakehouse data, but just living within their security controls and not having to go and build anything else elsewhere. Whew. Yeah, lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of things announced on the Wednesday. Now, some of those actually missed. I had to run off and go and do a live stream talking about the announcements, ironically, whilst the keynote was still going on. But there's just so much going on, so much announced, so many things to talk about. And there's going to be a load more. So we'll talk about the next part of that. We'll talk about the day 2 version of that. I'll drop a link to that session down in the comments below. Don't forget, you can just register and watch that for free. I'd recommend going and watching it and just getting a feel. Loads of demos in there about some of those things actually working. Loads of demos that we can see things that look very, very pretty. I don't know how many of them are actually available to play with, or how many of them are just concepts about this feature that's when it's going to come. But so much interesting stuff coming down the pipeline, or actually being announced and made generally available. So yeah, definitely a large language model theme. This generation AI is very prevalent. Lakehouse IQ, your very own LLM based on your own data that you don't have access to. It's just a hidden thing that makes your workspace suddenly understand what you want a hell of a lot better. all the way through to all the building tools to help you build your own large language models, to help you embrace generative AI, help you actually manage it in a MLOps style way. I keep saying LLM ops, which is just too much of a mouthful. It's just MLOps for a different kind of ML model. Just so many things in there, a raft of changes to Unity Catalog, so many additional features to Unity Catalog that if you're not currently using it because you can't find someone who's got global AD admin access in your company, you just need to find them. Find them and ask them very nicely to sign in once to the account console. And that's it. That's all they need to do. And then you can start using UC. So I would heavily recommend it with so many features coming down the line. And then, yeah, the end of the format wars with Delta 3.0 adding uniform, which is just fairly huge. Don't worry, day 2 is just as bonkers. So many things coming in day 2. We'll talk about that as a separate thing. I'll put the link down below. As always, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you next time. Cheers.